couple years ago, I did a series of short videos on dealing with kids that had attention challenges. And fast forward a couple years, I've had a lot more experience working with this stuff directly in organizations through my business that now helps companies to overcome information overload. And I've learned a few things, and also I've seen a few changes in the world that I think will affect how people, particularly parents, teachers, and mentors, deal with attention challenged, or if you want to call them ADD or whatever type kids. So the biggest change I've observed is that society's ability to produce or require people to analyze data is dropping. Basically, we've replaced analysis with sort of rote memorization. I think for the purposes of risk avoidance or risk mitigation, and also because of the fact that the more that we prescribe things, the more that people lose the ability to analyze. And the fact is that when we find data online and we find answers to all of our questions, we lose that like analytical muscle that normally would be developed in our brain if all we're doing is basically being fed answers, right? So I've seen that in my office. I've seen my own employees, some of whom were excellent analysts, slowly lose that ability to problem solve on their own without being given all of the information, or even sometimes just given the answer. I've seen it a little bit in my own life if I'm not really careful to force myself to do that. So I think our society and the availability of information in our fingertips has reduced our analytical ability. So how does that affect a person who's attention challenged? Well, from the past, I've talked a lot about them needing a big picture challenge, a big picture goal. They need context to attack a problem and be able to have the motivation to follow through and solve it. It can't just be like, well, I'm checking the boxes so I can get my college degree or so I can, complete my certificate. They need to be motivated by a big picture goal that they have. And analytical ability is what connects those pieces. It's the connective tissue between someone's big picture goal that they have and their ability to break it down into a small series of achievable steps. And what makes that even worse is that where attention challenged kids and people fall apart in this situation is not at the big picture level, and it's not initiating the project. It's as soon as they hit a roadblock and they're forced to go backwards, rethink something, try it again, find a new resource, find a new material. That's when the bright shiny object takes over and they just divert and go over to a new project. So with this degraded analytical ability comes the price that they can't break these processes down into their subsequent steps, and be able to move from step to step to step logically, or say, hey, you know what, maybe I could just jump over a step, or maybe I could get more information over here. Instead, if the information is not readily available at their fingertips almost immediately, like society is training us all to think that way, they quit and they divert. Whereas somebody that doesn't have that attention challenge, even without analytical ability, they might just kind of grind away on something until they kind of bang into the answer or force their way through it. So this general motion away from thought, and I'll give you some examples of that, but in my own work, I've seen a lot of times where we have technical systems where people are not able to think through a 3 or 4 step process to deduce what's going on. I've seen that a lot with people actually in business, where it's like, why is our customer doing this thing? Or to the customer, why do you think your employees are acting this way? So when we help companies learn how to focus, we ask them questions, why is everybody communicating in this manner? Why are all the files here? Why do you think your employees, are really fed up and tired with this system you're using? And it's just not there. I mean, 5 years ago, they would have had answers for me that they can't produce now. So those are examples, and it's happening in schools and with kids all the time. So in terms of practical answers, there's obviously a lot of ways to solve it. I'm not going to get into all those details, except to say this. If people are given the answers, if you spoon feed a checklist that's a series of small steps to somebody, they don't have to deduce it or determine it, particularly someone with attention challenges, all you're doing is feeding their weakness. It's like feeding sugar to somebody that's addicted to carbs or whatever. It just prolongs the pain and the disease and the difficulty. They need to be pulled back, forced to like revisit the big picture, forced to analyze, not have answers spoon fed to them, and not be given like the whole checklist. They need to figure it out. Same thing I do when I'm teaching people, as I do as a hobby on the side to fly. A lot of times I will say, you know, don't just read the checklist and assume it's right. Ask the question, why were those items put on the checklist? I mean, a lot of times the checklists in airplanes aren't even developed by the manufacturer. Some other person just wrote it and stuck it in the airplane, right? So, you know, ask some questions, deduce, work in the big picture. I would encourage you to ask your kids that are attention challenged the same questions so they can become more analytical using their gifts rather than, you know, exacerbating their weaknesses.